Good morning. Welcome to a professional development video on teaching disciplinary writing. I am Cheryl Duffus. I am your QEP director. And if you are watching this video, then you have already found our QEP Writing Connection Blackboard org, and you're in the content area associated with the teaching disciplinary writing video. As you can see right here, I've got a link to the PowerPoint that I'm about to show you, and then some links to some other things I'm going to be talking about during the presentation. So when we get started talking about teaching disciplinary writing, I think the first point that I would like to make is that it's really important for the students' learning that we try to encourage the transfer of knowledge and skills from one writing class to another. That's part of the intention of this writing intensive curriculum, is that we create a continuum of teaching writing from students' first semester to their final semester, so that their writing skills are constantly being reinforced and improved, and that we're all kind of using the same common writing vocabulary when we talk about writing, and that studies have shown that improves the chances that students are going to transfer learning from one class to the next. What research has also shown is that students, if they don't have writing skills reinforced and required after freshman composition, then their writing actually gets worse, and they're weaker writers by the time they graduate than they were at the end of English 102, because what typically happens is that we think, oh, they had a year of writing instruction. Isn't this enough? But, and you know, I can see that point of view very clearly. But what happens with students, and this is where you have to look at, you know, how we want things to be or how things should be ideally, and then what happens in reality. And what happens in reality is students leave English 102 and they just stop doing all of the writing skills that we told them how to do. So they stop doing brainstorming, they stop using good research skills, they stop writing multiple drafts, they stop getting help and having people read their writing, all the things that we teach them how to do in freshman comp and that we tell them they need to keep doing. They won't do it unless they're required to do it. And so that's why we have this whole QEP, where there will be classes after English 102 requiring students to use the writing process. So that is helping students to transfer knowledge, and I think it also will help students transfer knowledge if, when you talk about disciplinary writing, if you connect to and build upon some of the writing that's taught in English 101 and 102, some of the terms that are used, etc. Fortunately, all the writing terms that we're using in the QEP, these are universal writing terms. They're used in all freshman composition classes. They align perfectly with the way that Gardner-Webb does freshman composition. So it's not like you have to learn anything new. You just have to emphasize which QEP writing words are students have already heard before. And so this helps students to transfer learning because you're repeating things and it sounds similar to what they have heard before. And I like to think of learning transfer, it's the professor's responsibility, but it's also a way that we can hold students accountable for their learning. They spent a whole year in writing classes. They should be held accountable for what they have learned in there. And that's also part of what this QEP is doing. So I would encourage you to, you know, kind of remind them, we know you took a year of freshman comp and we know what you learned in there. And this can be kind of, you can hold them accountable for this. And sometimes I wish that I could do this, that when I'm teaching literature and there's a reference to biblical passages in a work of literature, and I could say, I've got your syllabus from New Testament. I know you read this in Matthew and you talked about this, etc. So I don't know, I personally enjoy these kinds of accountability conversations. So I think you can connect to the writing that's taught and the writing skills and terms. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get out of this PowerPoint and I'm going to go back to our Blackboard org, and I have copied in here the units of study for both English 101 and 102. If you've ever wondered what in the world goes on in there, this is your window into it. So for English 101, this is a little bit more probably of what a lot of you would call more of a touchy-feely class. There's a lot of emphasis on the writing process and just getting students to develop one, to be accountable for having a writing process, etc. So you'll see a lot of language in here that has to do with informal writing, and that can be just free writing in class, writing in a journal, brainstorming. Pre-writing, you'll see a lot of drafting, revision, peer review, writing groups. This is where they start learning how to do peer review. So if you do peer review in your classes, you can say, I know you did peer review in English 101 and 102. What worked well for you? What was helpful for you? What wasn't helpful, etc. So you can remind them that they learned these skills. You can remind them that they had to write multiple drafts of an essay. They were having to write cover letters or reflection letters in English 101 and 102. So you can look through here and just see, words that are familiar to you because you're teaching writing in the QEP. These are the types of writing that they do. The first type of writing is probably something that you aren't going to deal with in your class, and that's more expressive, personal types of writing. Then they do the instructor selects a genre or a type of writing that the students then analyze for its characteristics. And so, you can see the assignments here can look at things like poetry, a short story, a blog, spoken word. You can see that these are either literary types of works or maybe more informal ones, and you're thinking, oh, I teach in business, I would never do this. Why do I care? But analyzing a genre, this is a skill that you could then ask them to analyze a genre of business writing and say, what are its characteristics? And you could say, oh, I know that in English 101 and in 102, you had to do genre analysis. You had to take a piece of writing and identify its characteristics. And so that's how you can, whereas you might never analyze a spoken word thing, these are the kinds of skills that should transfer from one class to another. In English 101, they also start writing persuasive writing, so persuasion, argument, that type of writing. So they do a little bit of baby research in English 101, but not a lot. You can see down here at the bottom of the page, the language writing groups, peer review, conferencing with the professor, proofreading, editing workshops. We're teaching them all of these things. We're reinforcing it, and you can hold them accountable and reinforce it in your class. All right, if you really want to, you can look at all the other requirements for English 101. All the SLOs are in here, the course objectives. You can see how many writing assignments they have to do, blah, blah, blah. I will say in English 101 and 102, there is no content that we're teaching. It is a skills class, so a lot of class time is spent helping them with these skills. English 102 is probably a class that's more familiar to you. This is a more familiar academic class. This is where we really emphasize argument, formal argument, and research. This is where they get their first, I think it's the second one. They have their first information literacy sessions in the library with University 111, and then English 102 is the second level. So University 111 is probably a very general overview, and then with English 102, they're going to learn more specific research skills because they'll have a specific research project. We require them to go to the library at least once. Here, I think we're starting to require 2 times. I'll take my English 102 students as many times as they need to go. Sometimes we go 3 and 4 times. It just, I think, helps them get comfortable with talking with librarians, with seeing them as approachable, helpful people. Sometimes students, they see us grown-ups and they get nervous. So there is a lot about research. There's a lot about using MLA documentation. Now, you may not use MLA documentation, but you can rest assured that we're at least teaching them that, you have to understand how documentation works. And there are similar components from one documentation style to another. You always have to cite your source material. So whether it's quoted or paraphrased, there is some kind of citation style that recognizes these things in text, whether it's footnotes or endnotes or parenthetical citations. And there's always a list of references at the end, no matter whether you call it a bibliography, references, or a works cited page. So you can remind students that they've learned these things, and this is how it's going to be different or similar in our class. They do lots of assignments where they're inquiring, and they do an assignment where they're inquiring into a topic, and this is kind of where they start their research and they have to start understanding how to do research. They do an analysis of a genre, again, and that's really emphasizing these analytical skills. And then they do a formal argument. They have to use research. It's a very traditional formal academic argument. All right, you can see again, there's the common language here of process work, conferencing, peer reviewing, etc. So if you were ever wondering what we do in English 101 and 102, then that is your snapshot of it. I would say again, you can certainly connect to analysis, especially this analysis of a type of writing. You might give your students a mentor text or talk about a disciplinary genre of writing, and you can say, these are the characteristics of this genre of writing, and you analyzed genres in English 101 and 102. If you do any type of persuasive writing, that is something that happens in both classes. There's also an emphasis on, describing, summarizing, narrating. Now, of course, you're probably not doing personal narrative or something, but you might want students to describe or summarize sources in something like an annotated bib or a literature review. You might also, in the sciences, you might have students describing or summarizing a lab for a lab report. And that's a way that you can use language that they've been exposed to and explain to them, this is how it works in this class for this discipline. Alrighty, so I think when you finally do get to the writing that you're doing in your class, you need to specifically identify the disciplinary writing that you are using. You name it, define it, and again, you can connect to how it might use the skills that they learned in a very broad way in English 101 and 102, especially analysis, argument, description, summary, those kinds of generic words. It really helps. Sometimes we just don't overtly identify the type of writing. You can explain to students why you chose this type of writing and how it connects to the learning in your class. If students see that the writing isn't just busy work, and sometimes they think it is because they're young, they might value it more if they can see how, this is going to help me learn the content, this is going to help me demonstrate learning, this is how I'm bringing new learning into the class, because they might be researching a topic that isn't covered in the class. This is how I'm applying the learning I've done, anything at all. So just get them to see, that they should have an investment or a connection to doing this writing project. And you can also, especially, this is a really good place to talk about, when you become a professional in this field, how would you use this writing? How would you use this type of writing? Again, I think you need to define the disciplinary writing's characteristics. When we've taught for a long time, or if we've been in our discipline for a long time, we just assume everyone knows what these things are. It's so obvious to us, and we have done them so often. Oftentimes we don't take the time to, specifically define the writing's characteristics. And you can also talk about, these reveal to us what we value about writing, about knowledge, etc., in our discipline. They're not random. Research has also shown that students oftentimes think that our writing assignments are just these random things that we thought of and that we're all these crazy people, and that the type of writing they do in one class, it's completely dependent upon that professor, and they'll get another professor and it's completely different. And that's not the case. When I'm teaching a literature class and I ask students to do literary analysis, I didn't make this up. This has been around for hundreds of years. So I think from my point of view, it's good for me to communicate, I'm teaching you the standard in my discipline. It's not something I personally have crafted. All right, I think what can be really helpful for students, because a lot of us, including myself, we don't really connect to abstract definitions. So you may identify the disciplinary writing and talk about its characteristics, but for me, that doesn't make sense until I see it connected to something concrete, until I see an actual example of the type of writing. So what can be really helpful for you is to provide a model or a mentor text that students can learn from. You can say, this is a model of this type of writing, and let's look at it and identify its characteristics. So this model or mentor text, it could be a student's work, or it could be something that was professionally published. It's really up to you as to what you think is appropriate. If it is student authored, you need to make sure you've removed all the identifying information about the student, especially the name. And I would say, you could give this sample to your class and have them work in small groups to identify those disciplinary characteristics that you want them to use in their own writing. You can also ask them to look for anything in this mentor text that's different or new that your assignment didn't cover, that you haven't talked about. And I would encourage lots of questions and discussions. And this mentor text can just be really mind-opening for them. And even in my English majors classes where I'm teaching literature, I'll tell them things like, okay, you have to write 3 literary analysis in this class, and you have to, pick 3 different novels that you're going to apply your analysis to. And students will do things where they want to write about the whole novel. And I'm like, you can't do that. You're writing a short paper. You need to focus on one character or one part of this novel, maybe even just, the opening, the ending. I mean, you can't write about the whole novel in a 5-page paper, or you're just going to be talking in general. You're never going to be able to get to anything in depth. It's all going to be very superficial. But they just get it in their heads that if they don't talk about the whole novel, then I'm going to think that they haven't read it or something. When, I've got other kinds of stuff that checks to see if they've been doing the reading. So I would tell them this for years and years, and they just, thought I was a crazy woman. And then I finally started bringing in professionally published articles on the literature that we were looking at, and they saw, oh, these people who are, have their PhD and are publishing, they only write about one character, or they only write about one part of this epic poem. They don't write about the whole thing. And it's like, ding, ding, ding. They finally got it, and they stopped writing those really superficial book report type of essays. So, bless them. Sometimes they just need that little extra reinforcement of seeing a professionally published article. Let's see. So that, again, it can turn on some lights there. I would say, too, with disciplinary writing, put those expectations in each step of the writing process. So everything from brainstorming, picking a topic. You can think of, when I'm picking a topic, when professionals are picking a topic in this field, this is how they go about it. When you talk about research, always think about, this is how professionals do their research. We constantly want to be teaching them how to be like us, I guess, how to be disciplinary experts. And so we have to just constantly talk about it at every stage. When drafting, revision. During peer review, I would incorporate these disciplinary characteristics into the peer review and ask students to evaluate, when they read their fellow students' drafts, are you seeing that this is meeting our disciplinary expectations? You can also provide a checklist at this point or for revision of the characteristics that you're looking for. And you can ask students to use it during revision, and you can require them to either turn in this checklist with their final draft or to report out how they've met these disciplinary expectations in their reflection letters. So it's just constant reinforcement. It's like training anyone. I was just thinking, oh, this sounds really repetitive, but this is just, you have to do it, or students just they won't get it. The A+++ super duper honor students will get it, but most people are not listening the first time you talk to them. Alrighty, so just thinking about next steps, I would recommend taking out your writing assignment and just saying, am I stating on paper for the students, or in writing if it's electronic, I'm identifying this disciplinary writing, I'm talking about the characteristics and its expectations. I'm explaining them, and then you can think about what's the best way for me to model these. How am I going to include these expectations in peer review? How am I going to use these expectations in my rubric or whatever grading criteria that I use? Because it's just, you got to tell the students in the assignment, you got to reinforce it through the writing process, and then you've got to hold them accountable for it in the grading. And again, I would say, ask yourself, how can I build on the learning that they've done in English 101 and 102, and how can I hold them accountable for these things and show them we're doing something similar. We're still analyzing something. We're just doing it in a discipline-specific way. Now, you may be asking yourself, this is, I think, all I have for this slideshow, yes. You may be asking yourself, but you didn't tell me anything about my specific discipline. And no, I didn't. because it's impossible for me to be an expert in disciplinary writing in every field. You are the expert on your discipline and in writing on your discipline. And that may not be helpful. You may be thinking, well, what the heck are we, why do we have you as QEP person if I'm the expert? I am here to provide guidance and help with resources. And so that's what I have done here. I've started a whole unit on this QEP org, and this is just an org internal link on discipline-specific teaching resources. Because I know for me, it's helpful to see examples of what other people are doing, and that can inspire me. I can think, oh, my class is very similar to theirs. Maybe this would work with my students. Or you can say, oh, that's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I would never want to do. So I'm just going to show you a few of these here, and you can explore them for yourself. This is an area I really want to spend more time on in upcoming months to build it up. I sort of started it and then for some reason ran for faculty chair-elect, and my advice is it takes over your life. So this is a link. It was the very first link here, and the WAC Clearinghouse. If you've watched these videos, you've heard me talk about it before, but WAC is just writing across the curriculum, and it's a clearinghouse of resources and support, and it's managed by Colorado State. And so I've clicked specifically to the teaching resources. They've got teaching guides, books for teachers who assign writing, links for instructors, faculty tip sheets, writing in the STEM disciplines. So writing across the curriculum, it is for all of us. When they say across the curriculum, they mean every single subject that is taught at a university. So they have lots of stuff here that's very short. So like a short 1 to 2 page handout with a list of activities that you could do. This is very practical. You can avoid all the theoretical stuff because I don't want to read that. I want people to tell me what to do. That's my philosophy. Tell me how to make my class better. University of Minnesota has been developing what we've been doing, a writing intensive curriculum for some time. And they have tons of resources across the humanities, sciences, social sciences. So I encourage you to click around here and just take a look at what your colleagues are doing at the University of Minnesota. And they actually link to a lot of other universities. So this is sort of the web thing. I didn't realize this when I was looking at this website, but if you click on these blue boxes, it gives you more links to look at. It also gives you, there's a ton of stuff here that are PowerPoints on elements of scientific writing, and you might find that helpful. Social sciences, here in this one, they're including psychology, and in the humanities, etc., and WAC resources. If you scroll up, you can see that there are some other teaching tips on there. But I think I've stolen a lot from the University of Minnesota in our QEP. There's a link here about disciplinary writing styles from the Chapel Hill Writing Center, and that's more student-centered than teaching-centered, because the Writing Center, it's for students, but you might find some things in here, some handouts that might be helpful for you to share with your students. From the WAC Clearinghouse, there's something about writing lab reports. And then I have 2 folders here, one on math resources. So I got a ton of stuff here. And then one on business resources. And it's my goal to build a folder for each discipline on campus. It's just, again, I started this some months ago, and stuff happens. I think that's the theme of the past 12 months or so here. So yeah, just keep checking back here, and if you have something, if you run across something, a great resource that you want to share with your colleagues, please let me know, and I'm happy to put it up here on this Blackboard. Org. If you have questions, please get in touch with me, or if you want to talk about an assignment, if you want me to go over an assignment with you, I am happy to do that. I am here to support you in your teaching. Just call me, send me an email, drop by my office. We can Zoom if you're off campus, and that's easier. I just would like to help make your teaching easier, especially teaching writing. So, wow, I think this went on for a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but again, just get in touch, and good luck with all your teaching.